Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another League of Legends guide video. And in today's guide, we're going to be looking over Nasus. Now, Nasus is a highly damaging tank which split pushes like a god, with almost nothing stopping him when he's stacking and stacking a heck ton. And he's one of the strongest tanks in my opinion, since he's the only tank that can infinitely stack his damage while still remaining tanked. So firstly, with Nasus, I'll be going over his abilities, then his runes, and builds along with the other vital information that's going to be useful about Nasus that you guys need to know. So firstly, we'll be looking over his abilities, starting with his passive, which is pretty simple. Nasus permanently has 12 to 24% lifesteal, which is based on level. Pretty simple. And then we'll be looking over Nasus's Q, which is Siphoning Strike, which is his main ability. Nasus empowers his Q for the next 10 seconds, which makes him gain a bit of extra auto attack range, dealing bonus physical damage. If his Q kills a target, Nasus permanently gains stacks, which means his Q does more damage. Nasus gains 3 stacks. Nasus gains 3 stacks when he last hits enemy minions and wards with his Q. However, he'll gain 12 stacks if he kills an enemy champion, a large monster, or a cannon minion with his Q. His Q is also an auto attack reset, so it also helps stacking under the tower and it makes it more flexible. We'll look at Nasus's W, which is Wither. Nasus withers an enemy champion, which slows them for 35% and is crippled by half the amount. And crippling in League of Legends is another form of CC, which reduces attack speed, both increasing over the duration of the wither. Then we'll look at Nasus's E, which is Spirit Fire. Nasus throws down a spirit flame at the target location, which deals magic damage in the area. As the flame remains, which is for 5 seconds, all enemies within the fire have their armor reduced, which lingers for a second per tick of the fire. And then we'll look at Nasus's R, which is Fury of the Sand. Nasus empowers himself for 15 seconds. While gaining bonus health, armor, magic resist, and increased size, he also receives bonus attack range for the duration. He also deals magic damage to all enemies around him while reducing his Q's cooldown by 50% on top of what he has. This means if Nasus has 45% CDR in his kit and he presses ult, he will get 50% on top, which is 95% cooldown reduction on his Q, making it spammable, which lets you shred enemy towers and shred enemy champion. That's crazy. It makes him feel like he's on Earth, but he's not. It's just Nasus on steroids now. So now I'll just do a quick summary of the abilities, then we'll move over further to his maxing and his spells. So with Nasus's Q, you want to last hit every single minion you can, or even the enemy champion if need be, because it's going to help you gain a bunch of extra stacks, and stacks infinitely stack, if you want to put it that way. And the more stacks you have, the better it is, and usually you want to base your stacks upon the minutes you have. Usually I would like to have 100 stacks by 10 minutes, 200 stacks by 20 minutes, 300 stacks by 30 minutes. I'd say that's an average. I think a lot more people can do a lot more than that. Usually by 10 minutes, people end up having 150 stacks, so on and so forth. But usually you want to match it with your time. If you're 10 minutes into the game, multiply it by 10 and see if that's your stack amount. That's how I always work out if my stacks are actually far ahead or if I'm too far behind on stacking. So let's say I was 13 minutes into a game. If I'm not 130 stacks, I'm not doing good enough at least. But that's just how I do my outlook on how I use my stack. His W ability is super strong because it just slows an enemy champion for so long, and by the time it's ended, Nasus can just recast it. But this happens later on into the mid game, and it's super strong. It just helps enemy champions be completely crippled and really does work on enemy ADCs. His E ability does help reduce armor, so it's good for shredding down enemy champions, which combines really good with your R ability, because this makes your Q stronger and your E makes your Q stronger, so you're just going to be shredding them like crazy. So when it comes to maxing order for Nasus, of course you want to go your Q ability, you want to max it as soon as you can because you want the CDR and the damage from, and then you want to max your E second because you want to make sure you can have that up consistently, because you want to shred a bunch of armor on them, and you can even use your E ability to farm down minions as well to shred them down. And then you want to max your W straight after you do your E, because Wither is super good, but it's not so effective in the early game in terms of maxing, but it's such a useful ability for helping set up ganks. And then you want to max your R ability as soon as you can, whenever you can. And then on the spells, you want to either go Flash TP, Flash Ghost, or Flash and Smite, because you can go with him on jungle, and he gets a bunch of stacks for when he goes jungling, because large monsters give him 12 stacks. So he's actually a pretty strong jungler, but I'm not going to be showing how to jungle with him in this guide. I'm just going to produce many tips on how it can help you within the jungle. So Flash and TP is the most generic thing you take on Nasus. By the time you're done stacking, or if you're low, can recall and come back, not miss any minions, and carry on stacking. He can stack under tower very effectively and easily. Otherwise, you can take Ghost if you want to go for an aggressive option, because some people can rarely outrun the Wither on Nasus, and his Ghost will help stick onto enemies and help dive enemy champions even under their tower, because by the time Nasus is super tanky and has a lot of stacks, he can dive completely anyone and use Ghost to help him do that quite effectively. He can even use Ghost to help him escape, because sometimes Flash alone is not enough. And then when you go Smite, you could just take him jungle, getting leashed by your ally champion either on red or blue buff. Blue buff is really nice to take at first because it has the CDR along with the mana, so you can keep stacking like crazy, but also you need to alert your allies that you're going to be stacking a lot, unless you're able to make some nice ganks if the enemies extend on the lane. So now we're going to look at Nasus's rune. So you want to start off with Resolve, going Grasp of the Undying, Undying, Demolish, Conditioning, and Revitalize. And then you can go into Inspiration, taking Magical Footwear and Cosmic Insight. You can take the CDR rune with 2 armor runes, so you can get the resistance, because you don't want to go for Adaptive Force because you're going to be focusing on stacking anyways. You're not looking to do damage. So Grasp of the Undying allows Nasus to get good sustain in the lane, since his passive also has Lifesteal combined with it. Grasp will also increase Nasus's health permanently, which goes well with building tanky, making him an unstoppable beast towards late game, since all your damage in the end comes from your stacks on the Q ability. And Grasp is going to be really effective against melee matchups, but you're supposed to use this regardless of any other matchup. And then you want to take Demolish because Nasus completely shreds towers. The more stacks he has, the more damage he does with his Q to a tower. Usually when he has around 1,000 stacks, which is mostly possible around 30 to 40 minutes in the game, one Q can take off 1/3 of the entire tower's health down. It's pretty damn crazy, but that's as long as you have minions there, and taking Demolish on top of that will help you get turret platings early on in the game, and it just helps you split push like crazy. Then you can go Conditioning, which gives you armor and magic resist 10 minutes after the game, and increasing your armor and magic resist by 5% straight after that as well. And then Revitalize can help with the healing you get from your passive, and from any other items that may give you more healing. Otherwise, you can go Overgrowth as well, but I would most likely go either Overgrowth or Revitalize, depending on what matchup I'm up against. And then I take Inspiration, go in Magical Footwear, because boots are not super essential early on into the game, and it's just best to get it for free, because usually with the Nasus, you're playing the time game, you're stacking, you're not really trying to kill the enemy champion unless your jungler makes that opportunity for you. But you want to be stacking like crazy, and you don't need to worry about your boots because you'll get them for free from Magical Footwear. It saves you gold as well, because you're trying to focus your gold on resistance items, and then you want to go Cosmic Insight to have more CDR. The more CDR you have on Nasus, the stronger he's going to be when he presses ult, and the more often he can use his Q. This is how he's going to achieve 95% cooldown reduction, and the CDR rune does help you achieve this goal a lot quicker. So now we'll move over to Nasus's builds before we move over to all of his laning phase and team fight. So when it comes to starting off with Nasus on the items, you either want to go Corruption Pot or you can go Doran Shield and Healing Pot, depending on how strong the matchup is, but I would usually most likely always go Corruption Pot because it gives him the mana he needs to continue stacking, because eventually he does get mana hungry when he's stacking for a long time, and usually he's in lane for a very long time when he's focusing on stacking on the minion. And then when it comes to first back items, you either want to go for a Sheen, a Phage, Bramble Vest, or a Spectre's Cowl, but if you didn't go Magical Footwear, you could also get boots as well. I'd say for when it comes to stacking and you want to stack more desperately, I'd go for Sheen because it has a bit of CDR, has some mana, and it does a little bit more damage. It also amplifies the Q's damage. Phage is good for champions that are doing so much damage to you, and you're gonna need some of that health from the Phage, because Phage does help you stay alive in lane a lot more consistently than Sheen. Bramble Vest is good to take against matchups like Fiora or Darius, because they'll be healing a lot with their abilities. They have abilities that heal them, and they'll be doing a lot of damage to you, but they're also AD based, so this can help counteract that. Otherwise, if you're fighting the most annoying matchup, which is Teemo, or anyone that's AP and doing high amounts of damage to you, you want to go Spectre's Cowl, because you want to build that into an Adaptive Helm or a Spirit Visage, but usually you can build them into both, because Spirit Visage gives you the healing, but we'll move over to that in a second. But when it comes to core items, you want to always finish off your Trinity Force as soon as you can, because this is your main item. You have the 20% CDR, the mana, and the health, and the damage that comes from this. It has so much base stats, and it's got a really nice passive as well to go with Nas. But the rest of your items can be resistances like Dead Man's Plate, Spirit Visage, Thornmail. Thornmail does give you that Grievous Wound passive for when enemies attack you, so it's really good against AD champions that heal, like Yasuo, Fiora, and Darius. Taking Dead Man's Plate also gives you that movement speed, which is crazy for when you're chasing down enemies, and it helps slow them down when you proc it on them. Spirit Visage is really good because of your passive healing, and it amplifies thanks to Spirit Visage. Mercury Treads is good to take against AP matchups or CC matchups. Otherwise, you can go Ninja Tabi in this case. And then you can take Sterak's Gauge. It's super good because most of the times Nasus will most oftenly get bursted down if people know you're the biggest threat, but usually Nasus is not seen as the biggest threat because there's other bigger threats on your team, like your marksman or your mid laner. That's why Sterak's Gauge is going to be good for the long run, because if they do burst you down, you're going to stay alive longer, and your team will most likely help you out if they're coordinated pretty well. But when it comes to situational items, you want to either go Iceborne Gauntlet or Frozen Heart. These items are super good. Iceborne Gauntlet has the slow from when you're queuing, and Q does apply on it. Well, it's basically an empowered auto attack, so it will apply on it effects regardless. And it gives you the 20% CDR along with the mana that comes with it. The same does apply with Frozen Heart, but Frozen Heart also has the passive of where it's similar to Crippling, where enemies will attack you more slowly, so their attack speed is reduced when they're near you, and combining that with Wither is super strong because they don't get to attack speed you at all, which is really good against enemy marksmen. And then you can go Righteous Glory if you're looking to chase down your enemy champion. I'd say this is a really fun option. You get the mana, you get some CDR, and you get an active which lets you just run down on the enemy champion. Not even that, it makes you run down on enemy towers. This is really good for backdooring as well. But also for backdooring, you can even use Z0 Portal portal, which is really nice to put down and push out enemy towers, because Nasus is one of the best split pushing champions in the game because of how strong his Q is and how strong his stacks make him for when it comes to farming down towers. But when you're fighting someone like Teemo or Singed, or anyone with a poison, I would go with Adaptive Helm, because nobody will be able to do so much damage to you, even the Teemo, because even though his poison does linger, it does hurt less and less, because that's what Adaptive Helm does. It lets spells that consecutively hurt you reduce. And then Randuin's Omen is good against also marksmen and also to stick onto enemies because it has an active which slows enemy champion. Then you either want to go Ninja Tabi for when it comes to heavy AD matchups like Fiora, you want to go Mercury Treads for when it comes to highly CC and AP champions on top lane, or if you're feeling a little bit ahead of yourself and you're getting really far ahead in the game, you can go for Ionian Boots because you can get that 45% CDR very fast, along with having your summoner spell CDR be reduced as well. But then just to finish that off, you can go Guardian Angel if you don't want to die. You're going to be living long and you're just going to come back alive with a bunch of health anyway, and you sustain that up pretty well because you do have lifesteal. But there's many other options to take on Nasus that I can get into, but these are one of the main and best ones. And then when it comes to an example build, here's what a generic Nasus build would look like. He has the Trinity Force for the core item, and he already has 40% CDR thanks to Spirit Visage and Righteous Glory, combining with Trinity Force, and then you have Cosmic Insight. And we've already explained how these items work, so it's a pretty generic Nasus build. So now that we talked about Nasus's build, I'm going to be talking to you about his laning and how you're supposed to play him on late game. When it comes to Nasus, on level 1, you always want to take your Q first because that's his main source of damage and it's his main source of actually farming and building his stacks up. And you want to most likely play safe, and you want to allow the enemy minions to get low by your minions so you can last hit them with your Q. If your Q is down, you want to auto attack. You don't want to miss minions regardless. You just want to make sure you can last hit minions with your Q. So you're basically farming minions with your Q. You don't have to rush them down. You can wait patiently and you need to make sure you can get them, which is why it's good to build a freeze. If enemies don't punish you for stacking, take advantage of that. Just keep stacking. Ignore them. If they're just going to completely ignore the fact that you're stacking, and if they're not trading hits with you, just keep stacking, ignore them. You don't even need to hurt them. But if enemies do punish you for stacking, play safe and let the wave push to you so you can effectively farm under the tower or when they're distanced away. But if you know walking up to a minion will get you punished, do not do it unless you have to or unless your jungler is there. Make sure you Q cannon minions since they give you quadruple the stacks of a normal minion. But however, don't step up to kill them if it's going to result in a massive trade loss or death, which is most often the case with Darius because he'll just grab you, stack on you with his 5-stack passive on the bleed and then ult you. So you gotta be super careful. So instead, when it comes to that, you can just use your E ability to kill that cannon minion. Just farm it rather than stacking it if you cannot do it. You'd rather last hit minions with your Q than auto attacks though, but only farm with autos if your Q is down or if the minion requires one hit to kill it. The more you stack, the more damage you're gonna have as Nasus, and you'll be doing more damage to the enemy champions and the towers, making you prepare for the late game and split pushing and destroying. So remember, Nasus is all late game. You're preparing for the late game using those stacks. Using your R ability defensively or offensively is perfect, but you gotta make sure that you have stacks to back it up because your R will massively reduce Q's cooldown, allowing you to dish out a lot of damage by spamming the Q ability. And Nasus's kit is amazing for destroying enemies 1v1 when stacked pretty well, even 5v1 sometimes, but his W does also help stick onto enemies and consistently damage them, allowing them to reduce their armor with his E ability. His ability can be used to farm minions as well, like I was saying, for when it comes to capturing minions you cannot reach or if it gets you punished. If the enemy builds a freeze on you, which forces you to extend, you need to start having vision behind you, or you need to recall, see if you can make another decision. If you can make another roam, go for it, or you can call your jungler to break the freeze, because usually the enemy's making that freeze so they can either kill you themselves or have you prepared for their jungler. So you need to have your jungler break the freeze, or you need to attempt to break the freeze from far away using your E ability. But once you're pretty well stacked, you'll be able to snowball hard and kill multiple champions. Last hit absolutely everything, even queuing jungle monsters. Sometimes even on top lane, you can end up farming Krugs when your enemy is freezing upon you. You can just go farm other stuff and let your jungler know. But when it comes to late game with Nasus, you want to look to keep stacking no matter what while being able to split push. If enemies are looking to rotate on you while you're occupied by minions, I'd say the best option to do is just execute all the minions and run. And by that, I mean just throwing down your E, farming them all, and just running. If you have no time to do that, just run regardless. And otherwise, go for the tower as fast as you can if they don't react to you split pushing. Taking TP is really useful in this situation as it will open up opportunities to split push, and you can base race and team fight with your TP. Base racing has been such a popular thing with Nasus because he can just shred towers almost instantly and just end the game without the enemies even knowing. Nasus will usually never be focused in team fights since he's super tanky. However, they'll also need to remember that Nasus still does more damage than your average tank champion and sometimes even more than your actual ADC. Nasus becomes a huge threat when it comes to split pushing, forcing other enemies to rotate, and it just opens up opportunities for the other objectives, such as towers and on the other side of the map, or, Dragon or Baron. And Nasus can usually tear down towers in an instant when activating ultimate because he can spam his Q. You could just use your ultimate alone just to shred towers if need be, even when you're rushing them down at their Nexus, which helps him massively for base racing. And if the enemy has your minions under the Nexus tower, that is home run for you. It's your biggest opportunity to quickly end the game at base racing. If the enemy has minions at their Nexus tower, they're just completely gonna get obliterated, and it's your biggest opportunity to end the game by TPing, activating ultimate, spamming Q, because late game, nobody's gonna be able to stop you unless someone was already at base, unless they really can't kill you at all. Nasus' Wither is very effective against enemy ADCs as well, because this will cripple them and slow them, making it easier for your allies to kill them. Nasus also nicely sets up ganks with his W because it lasts quite a long time, and regardless of if it's the enemy, and even if the enemy does flash, it's still gonna be lasting, the whole duration. It doesn't matter. That slow is crazy. But yeah, that's a lot of things about Nasus that you gotta know. But there are many other things about him, and we're gonna be moving over to his combos and tips. So now that we looked over Nasus' combos and tips, we're going to be looking over his pros and cons. So one of the pros of Nasus is he's extremely strong in the late game. He can infinitely stack damage with his Q, and he's very tanky and high in damage. He has amazing split push potential with high stacks. He can stick to enemies with his W, can turn around a 1v1 or an entire fight with his R, and can safely farm under the tower, and he can massively sustain in the game with his passive. But when it comes to his cons, he can get caught out pretty easily when he's overextending on the lane, which is because he has low mobility and he doesn't have much escape option, because all of his abilities are mainly offensive anyways. Also, Nasus does rely on his stacks and farm, so you need to make sure you're stacking and farming, otherwise you're not going to make any progress on when it comes to damage. Chain CC can prevent him from doing lots of damage when he's fed, because a lot of people are going to look to hunt you down after you're fed. So if they do coordinate to actually shut you down, you're going to be quite vulnerable for when it comes to CC. If Nasus is denied farm and killed a lot, he is going to be useless for a long time. So the best option to do even after that is continue stacking regardless, because you're not going to be able to do anything. But even a feeding Nasus early game can end up being a god Nasus late game. But usually Nasus does put more into split pushing rather than team fighting, so that will mean there's one less player in a team fight, but it's only because his split push potential is better than his team fight potential, because in team fights all he does is stand there, or he has to wait for an opportunity, or see if he can overstep to get a wither, but sometimes even that's dangerous. And early on in the game he can get quite mana hungry for when it comes to laning, and when he's in lane for a long time, and sometimes you don't want to get get out the lane because you don't want to lose minions that enemies are going to shove into you. So it just depends on how much of an opportunity you have, or if you have TP on you. But other than that, Nasus is an easy to play and strong champion, and he's actually one of the strongest late game champions in the game, since his Q is infinitely stackable, and he's the only other champion that can do that than Veigar, because Veigar can infinitely stack along with Nasus. Other than that, he's really easy to play, he doesn't take much to learn, and he's good to climb with usually in solo queue, and the performance of his damage will usually reflect on how much stacks and farm you have. But this makes good practice for when it comes to playing defensive and into hard matchups, because Nasus will always dominate those matchups when it comes to late game if he does manage to stack. He can dominate completely anyone in a 1v1 situation as long as he's stacked well enough. But anyways guys, that was pretty much Nasus. That was pretty much everything I could discuss with you. If you guys don't know anything about matchups or anything else about Nasus, go ahead and leave that in the comment section below, and I will go ahead and make some more guides that you guys suggest for me, and I cannot wait to, take a bunch of suggestions and start making more guides about this. And it's almost going to hit season 10 soon as well, so I'm going to be prepared to make a bunch of videos for that as well. So anyways guys, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. Peace guys, and see ya.